Hello, you. You're listening to A History of Italy. Episode 192, Leonardo da Vinci Part 2, From Florence to Milan.
E così ritorno su, lascio I colli nelle valli, tra due salici piangenti, io ritrovo la speranza di un amore che ormai fu.
In the last episode, we saw little Leonardo da Vinci come into this world as the illegitimate child of a well-to-do notary and a farm girl, and spend the first part of his lonely childhood exploring the countryside around Vinci, observing nature, and starting to draw on the tons of available paper in his father and grandfather's notary offices. Leonardo had lived with his grandfather in Vinci, but Grandpa Antonio died in 1564 when Leonardo was 12 years old. He went to live with his father, Piero, in Florence, who by this time, after the death of his first wife, Albiera, was married to Francesca, his second wife, who was also more open to the idea of having Leonardo in the house. He would, however, never be made legitimate, and so never inherit anything from the Da Vinci family. At the time in Florence, there were many active artist workshops, around 400 indeed, and one of the most well-known was that of Andrea Verrocchio, artist, sculptor, goldsmith, and all-around jack of many trades. Piero da Vinci, in his business, ended up coming into contact with Verrocchio and decided to take his son Leonardo and some of his drawings to show the famous artist. Verrocchio must have seen some promise in these early sketches or owed Piero a big favour, and by the late 1560s Leonardo was working and later also living in Verrocchio's workshop. This didn't mean just painting, drawing and sculpting all day. There were all kinds of other complex procedures that rotated around the arts. You couldn't, of course, just go down to the local arts and crafts shop to get your paints, for example. You had to have an area in your laboratory to make them and the chemical expertise to do so, knowing which ingredients, how much of them, and how to mix them together to create various colors. Apparently, ultramarine blue was the most expensive color to make. This allows us to observe that Da Vinci didn't work in a sort of artistic and technological vacuum in which he had to invent everything from scratch. Indeed, a lot of his artistic techniques, drawings, and inventions were inspired in imitation or even copied from others. But that is not to diminish his worth. Whatever Leonardo undertook, he would invariably do so with more passion, more depth, and more acute observation, getting things to the point where they could actually work. One of the things Verrocchio's crew had to deal with was lifting heavy objects such as statues, and that required a certain knowledge of engineering. It is in 1471 that Leonardo's interest in this field really took off when he was made part of a commission that would figure out how to lift the new giant 2-ton bronze sphere that had been made to go on the top of the Cathedral of Florence, Santa Maria del Fiore. We know that the dome, the largest self-supporting brick dome in the world, coming in at 37 tons, was created by architect Filippo Brunelleschi. Without electrically powered modern lifting machines, the team managed to hoist the huge sphere up more than 100 meters to place it where it sits today. Da Vinci, of course, also showed an early flair for painting. In 1472, he joined the company of the painters of San Luca, and the following year he painted his first independent work, although he may have collaborated with a certain Alessandro Botticelli. The painting was most likely inspired by the early drawings and observations of the landscapes around Vinci. 1474 was the year in which Leonardo painted his first portrait, depicting a friend of his, Ginevra de Benci, one of the most well-known and cultured women in Florence at the time. Leonardo would have met her through their families. Indeed, the Benci were clients of the Da Vinci notary firm. Leonardo would continue from 1474 up to his move to Milan to be a guest at the Benci house. Leonardo would have been a great dinner guest if you like someone who listens and asks barrages of questions in his continuous, obsessive quest to know everything. Otherwise, he was possibly quite annoying. He would also have been a trendy-looking guest, all dressed in fashionable clothes with a nice cloak, especially after he had reached some financial stability. He would have made quite a figure, tall, good-looking, and with an athletic build. He continued, however, to feel out of place, to suffer from a sense of inferiority due to his illegitimacy and lack of formal studies. He resented the cultured scholars who saw what he did as useless and wrote in his notebooks that their words had the same value of the air that came out of their arses. His words, not mine. He was disappointed by most people and declared himself a disciple of experience rather than of formal studies. He didn't know Latin either, which precluded a lot of sources, and although he tried to learn it, he didn't have the consistency to manage to master it. He also created quite a considerable library, going from having no books at all when he arrived in Milan to owning a library of around 2,000 volumes. This was, of course, helped by the invention of the printing press. Indeed, in the 30 years after its invention, more books were produced than in all of the Middle Ages, and prices fell by 80%. Let's hope there were no tariffs on the books. Of course, another aspect of social interaction is sex, something that Leonardo thought and wrote about profusely, both in terms of his feelings about it and from a more scientific point of view. He wrote about his little Leonardo as part of his body separate from him, that at times slept when he woke, and others woke when he slept, and seemed to have a mind of its own. Sigmund Freud, who wrote a treatise on Da Vinci, had a field day with this, writing about the repression of his sex drive. In 1476, sex got him into some trouble with the authorities, as he was among a group that was anonymously accused of having had sexual relations with one Jacopo Saltarelli. In the end, aside from the anonymous letter left in one of the city's denunciation boxes, there were no real witnesses, and it seemed Leonardo got off without any prison time. Although he did design a machine that would have destroyed prison walls, so at least the possibility must have crossed his mind. That same year, his father, Piero, finally had his first legitimate son with his third wife, definitively cutting off any possibility for legitimacy or inheritance, although Leonardo did not know it yet. Going back to his work, he continued in Verrocchio's workshop, contributing with an angel to the master's Baptism of Christ, the one on the left. Legend would have it, according to artist and biographer Giorgio Vasari, that upon seeing the figure, Verrocchio put down his brush and never picked it up again, feeling that he could not reach such heights. This is probably not true, but we get the idea that Verrocchio thought Da Vinci was pretty good. In 1477, he felt that he had learned enough and set up his own workshop. You know, my dear constant listener, that the following year, 1478, Florence was rocked by the Pazzi conspiracy, in which Lorenzo the Magnificent was wounded and his brother Giuliano killed. The culprits were eventually all hunted down, and one of the last who had tried to seek refuge in faraway Constantinople, Bernardo Bandinelli, was extradited and hung. We have a drawing by Leonardo depicting the hanging. As far as Lorenzo de' Medici is concerned, we're not sure what his relationship with Da Vinci was. He was only 3 years older than the artist. A patron of the arts, Lorenzo must have appreciated his talent, but perhaps the practical and shrewd politician and banker perceived the lack of reliability of the artist. It seems in any case that it was Lorenzo who presented Leonardo to his next actual patron, Ludovico Sforza il Moro, the de facto Duke of Milan, in the place of the official Duke, his nephew Gian Galeazzo Sforza. Leonardo was quite happy to get out of Florence by this time, as his reputation was starting to suffer from scandals and delays in his work. For example, he had been commissioned a painting of the Adoration of the Magi, but he never actually finished it. So it was that in 1481, at the age of 30, Da Vinci moved to Milan to be in the service of Ludovico il Moro. we have what you could call a Renaissance-era LinkedIn description, the letter of presentation that Leonardo wrote to Ludovico. It goes on and on about all the marvelous machines that Da Vinci would be able to build for Il Moro, as well as the giant equestrian sculpture to honor Francesco Sforza, founder of the dynasty. His talents as a painter were almost an afterthought at the end of the letter. Like one at times does to project a better image of oneself to a potential employer, Leonardo was not quite completely truthful about these military engineering skills, but he quickly set out to fill the gap, relying heavily on a 1472 manual called De Rerum Militari of Military Things by Rimini-born historian and technical designer Roberto Valturio. Leonardo's projects include a machine gun, cluster bombs, a tank, a helicopter, a parachute, a submarine, a life preserver, an underwater breathing machine with a valve system, and so on and so forth. I think my favorite is a non-military invention, an automatically rotating spit for roasting food. Again, these things were not thought up out of the blue by Da Vinci. For example, the submarine and underwater breathing system had been theorized by Siena-born naval engineer Mariano di Jacopo, known as Taccola, who had died in the year of Leonardo's birth. As we said, Da Vinci would take existing ideas and bring them to a new level of detail and consideration, making them more realistically feasible. Having said this, modern attempts to create Da Vinci's machines exactly as he designed them have often failed, leading some to believe that he would purposely add errors to make sure the designs could not be realized without him, something in line with his rather reserved and secretive character. Whether it was his application letter or something else, as we mentioned, he ended up in Milan. He didn't actually get around to making all the machines he boasted he could make, but he did study and perfect the already 300-year-old Milanese canal system by adding a new valve design. He was also the court entertainer, preparing shows for such events as feast days, holidays, and weddings, in which he could have been involved in everything from scenes, props, and lighting to hairstyling. These shows will also include all sorts of gadgets and contraptions, which even included programmable moving wooden robots. Again, these were perfected and elaborated from designs heading all the way back through history to the times of the Great Library of Alexandria. Among the many great thinkers of the past that tickled Leonardo's curiosity was the Arab mathematician, astronomer, and physicist Hassan ibn al-Haytham, who had lived around the year 1000. In particular, what tickled Leo's fancy was the study of optics and the concept of the camera obscura. If the legend is to be believed, and we usually try to when it's cool or funny, Da Vinci would take this knowledge and create what could be considered one of the greatest practical jokes in human history. Thank you very much for listening. Stay tuned for the sketch after the credits. A History of Italy is a Sentire Media podcast created and hosted by me, Mike Corradi, and produced by my wonderful Patreon supporters, whom I'd like to thank, starting from the second half of the Margherita Hack and Galileo Galilei level. And they are Jeffrey W., John W., John T., welcome aboard new listener John T., John J., Jordan C., Joshua G., Julia G., Justin E., Kyle D., Old John in Milwaukee, Mark P., Michus Porcius, Moppet King, Nonna, Paradise, Patrizia K., Rocco B., Rod L., Russell F., Sandra P., Sean M., Shelby, Shelley, Simon, welcome Simon, Steve M., Tap Dance Down Under, and Thomas C. Welcome aboard, Thomas. Then, of course, we cannot forget the tippy-top Maria Montessori and Dante Alighieri level, Lisa K., Peter W., David L., David C., Sen, David A., Karen, Bridget, Dallas, Joseph, Stephen, and Julian. Thank you, one and all. If you'd like to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. hello@historyofitaly.com or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Once again, thank you so much for listening, my dear constant listener, and until next time, arrivederci. Ah, Da Vinci, there you are.
Ah, hello, Father. What can I do for you?
Do for me? You know very well what you can do for me. Finish the work you started.
The work? What was I doing for you?
You mean you don't remember?
Was I doing up your hair in the latest style?
Hair in the latest... Look at me! I don't even have any hair!
Ah, yeah. Did you want some cluster bombs?
Cluster bombs? We are men of peace, for goodness sake.
Are you? Well, that never really seems to stop the popes.
Well, I suppose you have a point there. But back to the work you've already been paid for and are not even close to finishing.
Okay, don't tell me. Was it the submarine?
The what?
The machine for going and staying underwater.
Why on earth would I want to go underwater?
I don't know, for fun? To see the fish?
I don't want to see any dumb fish. I want the painting.
Ah, yeah, the painting. Yeah, the one of the...
You don't remember, do you?
Of course I do. It was the painting of the fish.
Fish? What's all this about fish? I said I don't want any painting of any stupid fish.
Why do you hate fish so much? What have they ever done to you?
I don't hate fish at all. I just don't want a painting of them, and I don't want to go underwater and see them. Now, Da Vinci!
What? Oh, hello, Father. Fancy seeing you here.
What were you looking at now?
Oh, that bird. Aren't they amazing? Look how it flaps and soars on wind.
Bird? First fish and now birds?
Ah, okay. So you want a nature painting with fish and birds, right?
No! I want a painting of the adoration of the Magi.
So you do want a bird painting then? And you do love birds?
What?
The adoration of the magpies.
The Magi! The 3 wise men, the ones who followed the star to Jesus to bring him gifts.
Was that wise, though?
What?
Following a star. I mean, they could have used a sextant and a map. I'm pretty good at maps, too. By the way, would you like a map?
No! I would like you to finish the painting of the adoration of the Magi, which you supposedly already started.
Shall I put in some birds in a pond with some fish?
Can't we just have Jesus, the Holy Virgin Mary, and the 3 wise men?
Boring!
What?
Tell you what I'll do. I'll put in those people and maybe some others so they can have a bit of a party. And maybe a couple of horses.
Really? Do we really need horses?
Well, you've got to have some animals. Anyway, I'll put in the people and a couple of horses and no bird and fish. But I'll put in a guy to do right, looking at birds and thinking about fish.
Whatever, just keep the fauna to a minimum and get the painting done, please.
Yes. Don't worry, I'll get your machine gun.
Painting
done in a few weeks.
In a few days? Weeks?
Look at how proportionate you are. Fascinating.
Da Vinci!
Okay, I'll get it done as soon as possible.
Good. I'm counting on it.
Yes, good. Now, where do I put the plans for the automatic meat turning spit?
Oh, I give up.